I think the common ground is the most important thing. Always look, you will have something in common with we're humans. So look for that common ground. Try not to put people in boxes as much as it goes. Look, try to be, open for surprises. Something pops up that you didn't know. Try to meet in a neutral place. If possible, meet several times, because if we only meet once, it can backfire. And really trying not to go into debate ever. Debates are wonderful. I love debates. This is not the place. Now you want to make yourself understood, and you want to understand the other.
Welcome to Purposeful Empathy, a show that is dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who understand the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. This season includes 25 incredible episodes devoted to the Inner Development Goals. Based on the science of personal transformation, the IDG framework represents 23 skills needed for today's world. And of course, empathy is one of them. You won't want to miss a single episode, so hit the subscribe button now. Thanks for watching and enjoy the show. Welcome to a new episode of Purposeful Empathy. Today I am joined by Emma Stenström, who is an associate professor and the director of Research Center for Arts, Business and Culture at the Stockholm School of Economics. Emma teaches sustainable leadership at the bachelor's, graduate, and executive levels, and she's won several teaching awards and is a highly sought-after speaker. She's also a regular columnist in a Swedish daily business paper. Emma is the founder of Fika Project, an initiative that emphasizes the importance of slowing down, engaging in conversations, and nurturing community bonds as a pathway to greater empathy and collaboration. She's also the author of Bubble Hopping, a fascinating method for understanding others, which was named the Best Human Resources Book of the Year. I've invited Emma to join us on this special IDGs series because of her work is a remarkable example of perspective skills, one of the 23 skills of the Inner Development Goals framework. Welcome to the show, Emma.
Thank you. Wow, what an introduction. I'm impressed.
Well, what a life, what a career you've had. I'm very excited to have you as a guest on this podcast. And I would maybe like to, for all those people who are still discovering the IDG framework, especially here in North America, if maybe you could share why the framework was developed in the first place. I know you were part of those early conversations, and what you find personally alluring, attractive about the framework.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was part of it from the very beginning. Coming in, we started calling it mind shift. We didn't even call it the Inner Development Goals in the beginning. We called it mind shift. And we started having these kind of summits, but in a very, very small setting. Now they're very big. But we started thinking about what else is needed in terms of human development to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. That's really how it started. Small settings, mix of academics, business people, other organizations, not-for-profits, kind of like round tables. And then some people that are very entrepreneurial and very, very driven in the group, they went on to really develop the framework. And I'm not going to take credit for that. I was the beginning, I was part of the group, but then they have been just driving it. And then I'm just following along and running behind sometimes. I think it's a framework that is very useful for communicating. I've used it in my teachings at different levels. I use it sometimes to reflect myself upon what do I need to develop, and sometimes like what am I lacking at this moment. But I usually, especially like with organizations and with students, of course you can, there are things you can be skeptic about, but overall, as a communicative framework, I don't know any better.
And you mentioned that you use it in the classroom. So I'm wondering how you do that. You teach sustainability and leadership. So how is it useful within organizations and within, at the undergrad or graduate level?
Mm. Well, in the classroom, you can structure a course around it. You could actually, you could have each, you have, 5 different dimensions. I think they're called, I always use the wrong words here, but dimensions. So you could actually, either you structure a whole course around those dimensions and the skills within each category, or you could also, uh, which I do more, I'd say, you have a case and you think, okay, what this case, what is it illustrating? Well, perhaps it's, we talked about perspective skills, but it could also be like we do need to think a little bit about ourselves. Are we present? I could make the students kind of move into different categories. Oh, they need to collaborate in order to solve this case. And then, of course, they have to take action. And, sometimes maybe we are not the best at taking action, but we try to push the students, like, what could you do to make a difference when it comes to sustainability? So we really using it, or we have been using it in different settings for kind of like reflecting on what do we need in these different moments, different elements in order to create, for example, a sustainable business or a business that wants to make impact. I mean, other times I just let them. Right now, for example, I'm running a course with 300 undergrads. If I look tired, that's because I'm running a course with 300 undergrads. and they are writing like cases about businesses that want to make impact, that want to address global challenges, as we call it. And then, so they will be looking at the inner will just be just one part of the course, but they look at, in order to reach those goals, do they also work with inner development, both like within their teams, but also perhaps on more and more, I would say, between stakeholders, multiple stakeholders. So if I can give you a more concrete example, I like concrete examples. So I'm also involved in that initiative here in Sweden, where we talk a lot about the green transition, steel and mining industries, especially up in northern Sweden. In order to make those industries, they're trying to go more into green steel, for example, fossil-free steel. In order to kind of make that happen, because that will change a lot in societies, that they might double the population, for example. They need lots and lots of competence. It's not always easy to find it. I mean, lots of things take a lot of course with the communities, the local communities, indigenous people who've been living very long time up north, other industries, the police, the hospitals. How do you actually create those kind of multiple stakeholder meetings and collaborations? And there again, I think the inner development skills comes in a lot. Like, how can you actually develop the collaborative skills, the way of relating to each other, understanding the perspective skills, the thinking, the courage to create those meetings. And we just had, in my course, we just had representatives from the steel industry coming into class, talking about what they're doing, and then having students to look at cases and then continuing with that. And we use the inner development goals as a framework there to kind of categorize, sort, different skills that are needed in
Well,
order to for the
what
green
I
transition to happen.
as you're talking, I'm reminded of when I first became exposed to the framework and reflecting on the different competencies that are listed, thinking, what world would we live in if we really trained our young people to develop those skills? What kind of decisions would we make? How would we work together? What complexity awareness would we bring to the decision making? So I thank you for all the work that you did in the early days and the ways that you continue to bring these skills to life, specifically the perspective skills. So I want to drill in on this. That's a little handy card that summarizes the skills. Perspective skills is summarized or explained as skills in seeking, understanding, and actively making use of insights from contrasting perspectives. So it's the intentional pursuit of contrasting perspectives. I suspect you might have had something to do with that definition, given your work. So I'd love to dig in. You've written this incredible book, which has not yet reached English, bubble hopping.
Swedish.
Now, as of now, but let's see what happens in the months to come. Because the idea behind it is so important. I would like to give you the time to explain sort of why you wrote the book, what led to the creation of the book, the insights along the way, and how applicable you think the book is for today. So take your time with this answer.
That feels like, okay, few hours down, you know. No, I've just been teaching all day, so I'll try to make it a little bit brief. No, but the ideas, it started early. I think I've always been interested in bringing in different perspectives. I think it comes from my background, my personal background. I grew up in a home where arts and humanities, that was all that counted. And when I told my dad I was going to business school, he wanted to send me away from Sweden and said, I'll send you to France. That's going to make you have better thoughts because you cannot go to business school. He felt that it wasn't a political thing. He thought it was shallow to go to business school. I did anyhow because I wanted to rebel against him, and I wanted to do that for a long time in my life. So I went to business school, and I started working in the finance industry afterwards. And after a couple of years, I felt like, oh, maybe my dad was right. You know, maybe, I mean, he exaggerated. I remember one time when I came home, my dad said, "Oh, this is my only child. I'm also an only child." And she decided to work in business. And she might as well have become a drug addict and a prostitute. He introduced me to his artist friend as somebody who might as well have become a drug addict and a prostitute. So that's my personal background. And I very, when I worked in the bank, in the finance industry, I also felt like, but maybe, maybe my dad was a little bit right. Maybe there are things that I actually lack. So I went back to university and I did a degree in liberal arts and humanities. And then I decided that I really want to combine those two perspectives, the art and the business. And that's what I've been doing my entire life. And for many years, I was lucky enough to spend half the week at the business school and half the week at the art school. So I went between them, was a guest professor at the arts university and working at the business school, which was fantastic for me. And I felt like that was for me. But of course, you need to bring the students together. So I started working with initiatives that would bring students from many different disciplines together. And I saw how fantastic it could be, especially with some simple methods. I was like, simple methods could really leverage the exchange of knowledge and how they work together. That's where it started. It's really coming from that kind of interdisciplinary, working with students, of course, also research, but arts and business in the beginning, expanding to medicine, engineering, law, etc., 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 but still always interdisciplinary. Now, looking back, I think that was fairly easy. Students are, it's a good group to work with. It was fairly easy. I think it was like in 2018, I started to become more worried about society in general. I felt that I thought it was too much segregation, that we didn't communicate between different groups, that were lots of what we call affective polarization, that is like, it's less important what I believe in. It's like as long as I don't want to believe in what they are believing in, the othering, all those mechanisms and the outrage that I was seeing in society in general, in Sweden too, but elsewhere as well. Yeah, as well. So I started thinking that maybe, perhaps, what I've been working with since way back, since the kind of 80s, 90s, Maybe some of the similar methods could be used also to bring like groups that were more, a bit more difficult than coming from, I mean, arts and business can be difficult, but not on the same level as we're talking politics or very like, segregation, immigration, questions around that. But I really kind of took the same kind of interest and methods, looked into new ones, of course, and decided to work with trying to bridge. It's all what it's about, bridging between different groups and, of course, bringing different perspectives together. So that's where it started. And then started off in school with students trying out different methods, doing sometimes okay-ish research around it, having, collecting stories, analyzing them, seeing what worked, what didn't work, making tons of mistakes, and then deciding, okay, time to take it out of school and really try it more in society, within organizations, in between organizations, as I talked about before, like the green transition, for example, bringing stakeholders together. Typical example of where I would work with bubble hopping today.
I think the timing of this couldn't be more excellent, because if you were starting to pay attention in 2018 to the way the social fabric was fraying, I mean, social media must have played a big role, because we're all in echo chambers listening to ourselves, congratulate ourselves on our excellent ideas about things, and really othering, as you say, and demonizing the other side. So I think at multiple levels of scale, whether it's interpersonal relationships or within organizations or society as a whole, this idea of bridge building or bubble hopping in order to bridge build is excellent. So I guess I want to ask, and I don't know if you talk about this in the book, but I wonder from your research and your own insights in general, how does one open their mind to other people's perspectives when we are living in such insular spaces?
Mm. Yeah, definitely good question for sure. And I would say that there are more and more research. There's quite a lot of research. One of the things, simple way of putting it, of course, is that when we're talking about the extremes, it might not work, but we're talking about the 80% in the middle. Fairly, I would say, small, easy interventions can change, can open people's minds a little bit. I mean, there are fascinating studies. I mean, for anybody who's interested in it, I'd be happy to share. There are so many interesting studies. So it could be like simple things. Now, of course, I've forgotten all the names and I haven't prepared, but looking at a picture of in Antarctica, if your identity as being, somebody who denies climate change, or vice versa, you're a climate activist, or at least you don't deny climate change. If your identity as one of the others are activated before looking at that picture of the ice, you will actually guess that the ice is thicker or thinner depending on your own perspective and depending, of course, on the group you belong to. Now we're talking social identities and how much that can affect us, even when we're guessing the size of the ice. But just having a small conversation with somebody who believes differently, a small conversation before looking at that picture changes your guess. You become more accurate just by meeting somebody with a little bit. Yeah, we're not even talking like the big, that's the thing, that small interventions, they can backfire. You have to say that the whole contact theory we talk about sometimes also shows that, sometimes it's not, there are things that needs to be in place, intentions that need to be good. It's good to be in a neutral place. It's very, very important to not think about the other person as somebody who is, climate denier, whatever it is, climate change denial, or whatever it is, happens to be. But actually think about something you have in common. Always start with a common ground. Try to individualize and not put people in boxes. And that kind of the common ground, I think the common ground is the most important thing. Always look, you will have something in common with we're humans. So look for that common ground. Try not to put people in boxes as much as it goes. Look, try to be, open for surprises. Something pops up that you didn't know. Try to meet in a neutral place. If possible, meet several times, because if we only meet once, it can backfire. One thing I work a lot with is, and I made a mistake of not doing it in the beginning, I work a lot with intention, setting the intention, and really trying not to go into debate ever. Debates are wonderful. I love debates. This is not the place. Now you want to make yourself understood, and you want to understand the other. That's not the place for. It's not the place for banging facts and figures. It's a place for telling a personal story, for connecting, of course, for empathy. I think, there are some fantastic projects also using the arts again. I'm a big fan of that, where you use theater methods. The Georgetown University, the Lab for Global Performance and Politics at Georgetown University, for example, they bring together theater and political science. And they work with high conflict areas sometimes and groups, and they step into each other's shoes using theater as a method. So not only do they try to understand each other, they try to play each other, perform each other, to really kind of get into the other person's kind of skin. I do that too sometimes. I work with methods like that. Need a lot of psychological safety, need a lot of trust in the group. I wouldn't start. It depends on the context and the group, on the priming, of course. Like, how do you actually? So there are, tricks and tips and practices that at least, for a lot of people can help. But sometimes I'm also a huge fan of the German sociologist Hartmut Rosa. He's like my partner sometimes thinks I will run off with him. I've never met him, but I love his books. And I love his ideas. And I talk about him as if he was like the love of my life. But so he talks a lot about, he has this concept around resonance, and that's, it resonates, ideas can resonate with you, but also in a meeting, when you feel there's a call and response between two people, and there's that kind of in-between space where something happens. But it doesn't always happen. We cannot plan it. There are times when it does not happen, and that's okay. Life is not certain. So that's also, I always, every now when I run, courses with 300 students, there will be fights, there will be problems. Not everybody will meet somebody from a very different bubble, as I call it, a little bit playfully, with different perspectives, and connect. That's not going to happen. But some people will, and that can become beautiful meetings between different experiences and perspectives.
So as I'm listening to you, one of the things I'm taking away from your view on perspective taking skills and to have that capacity to intentionally seek out alternative ways of seeing the world for the purpose of finding common ground. So there's an intentionality to it, which I love. I wonder if that is connected to the work that you did with Fika Project. I'd love for you to maybe talk a little bit about that. And also then we'll come to the practical applications within organizations. So I'll come to that question next.
Perfect. Well, the fika, I'm sitting here having a fika, being the Swede I am, with you, but I don't see your cup here, but I am having you have your cup. Good. Yeah, the fika, is a huge part of Swedish society. They say it's also a big part of actual success for some of our companies. That it's almost mandatory in many organizations to have fika at least once a day at 3 o'clock, sometimes twice a day. Depends a little bit on the organization, but it's like if you don't go out for the coffee break or tea break with your colleagues and you meet across hierarchies, across departments, that's like unheard of, because that's where it really happens. So the fika has a very, very, very important a business side of it. I think we've always been talking about that. Like the fika in the office is very, very important. But when we created fika, which is not for profit, we did it together with some Germans and some French and with Swedes. And we just, we've been working with lots of different groups. I've been working, personally, I've been working quite a bit. I would run like business school seminars, and I run a lot of executive courses and stuff like that. And then on Sundays, I would have like meetups at home over a fika, coffee, tea, cake. And I would invite people that were newcomers in Swedish society. And they could be illegal immigrants, or they could be expats, or they could be, seeking asylum. I was different, very different group. And I invited them through Meetup, just one of the apps, to come over to my kitchen and have fika on Sundays. And I would always address the same topics that I would address with my executives and my students at the business school. That was also a way for me to get perspectives of what I was teaching. At the same time, I was like kind of Robin Hood strategy. They didn't even have to pay for the fika. That was like, I took that from the people that could afford it, and I gave it back, the knowledge, to those who might not access it otherwise. It's a way of, small Robin Hood strategy of trying to make education a little bit more democratic. But that would be things I do. But other times we would also, in the fika project, do the same things as I do today, like bridging between organizations or within organizations. And you're going to ask about that, so I can talk about that.
I am going to ask about that. So, you would like to see bubble hopping applied within companies, okay, to deliberately expose employees to completely different perspectives on a regular basis, right? Across units, across hierarchy. So why do you think that's valuable or important from a business strategy and productivity and KPI perspective?
Yeah, well, I would use some studies there and refer to some studies. It depends a little bit on what measurements you have or what you think is important, the goals. Definitely you see health and well-being aspects. Relationships in general are important, but it's also like more and more research around what we call, very like weak ties, or we're not talking about the very, very thick, friends and family or even colleagues. Just like having a diversity among your contacts seems to be actually helping with well-being and health, and that could be important for a company. The perspectives as such, of course, I like to talk about innovation and things like that. We know that. Also psychological safety and creating culture, bringing up perspectives. Amy Edmondson, for example, that's also very much part of IDG, she might use a word like boundary spanning instead of bubble hopping. Which sounds more serious actually, but I like bubble hopping. So, but it's also it's the same kind of idea, kind of crossing boundaries and understanding different perspectives, and it can be on many, many different levels. It could be between departments, between markets, between different stakeholders, ages, whatever, really, professions, etc., etc. It depends a little bit on the organization, the need. I don't think there's one recipe. Some will do it in a very playful way. There are lots. This is like, I guess maybe Swedish, but so for example, there's one big organization. It's a public agency. They run digital fikas, since we do have that tradition. So once a month, you will have a digital fika with somebody in the organization randomly assigned to you. Okay, you don't know who you're going to meet, but it's going to pop up. Oh, you're going to have a fika with somebody living in the other part of the country or in another country or whatever. And you'll have a fika and you have a set time that you exchange perspectives. So that could be one way of doing it. Like others have like, I don't know if you heard about that lunch roulette. That's like you don't know who you're going to have lunch with, but we have this little roulette. So you'll have that up. Yeah, you're going to have lunch with that person today that might work in a different department, etc. Other times it's more about stakeholders and bringing people together. So, for example, I've been working with a big retail firm here, and then we've been working actually with the family who owns it. It's a big family here, and they're very, very engaged in these questions. And they've been working. We have a problem with segregation, and that we are not always great at including everybody in a Swedish society. And so we've been working with high business leaders in their organization, CEOs on the boards of their organization, high up, working with local community leaders in less affluent areas of Stockholm, meeting, teaching each other leadership. They're all leaders. Some are local community leaders, some are business leaders. What can they learn from each other? But more importantly, what? Because I do think that's important when you work with groups like this. What can they do together? What can they accomplish together? Can we find that kind of shared goal? And how can they work together, the businesses and the local community not-for-profit leaders, with very much questions around a very specific local area that they're working in. So things like that. So sometimes it has a very like, this is the goal, we're doing it because of that. Other times it's like, sometimes I'm like, is this really important? But maybe it is. But for example, I was working with the National Association in Sweden for Sports. There it was, can soccer talk to ice hockey, or could boxing talk to bull? Can they understand each other's perspective and learn from each other? That can also be the case. Other times so I had a fantastic job. I worked with one of the best chefs in Sweden. And we worked with chefs to become, they were in school last year, culinary school. And he was the one working with the food and the beverage. And I was working with creating conversations, constructive conversations around the table with different stakeholders over a meal. So they would cook a meal, and sometimes it was always like around the theme of sustainability again. So they might be using ingredients that people don't think they can eat, but they're actually very healthy, and there are plenty of them and good for the environment. And then they would invite people with strong opinions, but they would share a meal. That's of course very important too, having that sensational physical. That's also fika, sharing that is a tradition in many places, of course. But we worked with that. How do you create meetings over meals around sustainability between
I
different
love that
stakeholders?
idea because there's a hedonic pleasure and there's community building, and then we soften with each other and are willing to listen to each other in a different way. As I'm listening to you, first I want to reflect on why I love the concept of bubble hopping, because my daughter's 8 years old, so it's not that long ago that she used to blow, the bubbles in that park. And I can visualize, I imagine that maybe that's part of the reason why you called it bubble hopping, is that when the bubbles pop, it means you're no longer insulated. That means you're like a citizen of the world. And if more of us do that, we could all be getting along a little bit better. So thank you for that concept. Playful, but it's actually got quite a bit of gravitas to it, I think.
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, there's something with the bubbles, they can pop and they can also merge. If I do that, I don't know. You don't have to stop blowing bubbles when you're 8. You could do it throughout life. Why not? I have a few here back in my office. I always keep that in my office.
Love it.
But you can see, how they can merge, they can pop, something happens. It's something that's dynamic. And I think that's a very, very important part of it. It's something we can change. So there's hope in it too.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And then the other thing before I ask my final question, just to share as feedback goes, when you're talking about bringing diverse perspectives together and the idea of integrating diversity which elevates, actually, I think, anyways, the whole, it circles back to biomimicry. Like, I don't know biomimicry well, but I'm very attracted to it as a concept, that what can we learn about life that is successful, about the natural systems, to inform how we are as human systems. And diversity is core to flourishing. If you have an ecosystem that is flourishing, it has diversity embedded in it. So again, you're reminding me of that.
Yeah, thank you. And now you are reminding me of that. That's very true. Thank you.
So last question. Thank you so much for this really wonderful conversation and all the great work you do. I always ask at the end of my podcast, since it is devoted to empathy, if you can think of a time when you were on the receiving end of empathy and what that meant for you.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, the situation that popped up and that I keep coming back to quite often in my life, that was now it's sad, but or it's maybe not so sad, but that was when I separated from the father of my son, and he met somebody else, and he dumped me. And I have forgiven him. There were reasons for that, of course, that he did that. But when it happened, my son was 6 years old. My life fell apart. It fell apart. And I was in Denmark, Copenhagen. When he told me, he was afraid to tell me. I can understand that too. And he called me. I was in a hotel room, and my life fell apart. And I was like, okay. And now I'm a single mother, and my partner has left me for a friend. And I remember also like feeling that I'm not going to make this on my own. This will not happen. I will not make it. So I reached out. I remember that. I took the train back to Stockholm. It's about a 5-hour, 6-hour train ride. I took the train back to Stockholm, and I sent out messages to friends, and I'm like, he has left me. I don't know if I'm going to survive. And my friends, it was just incredible. They stepped in. Somebody was like, okay, I'll meet you at the train station. I'll stay over at night. I've never seen, and also like there were friends who were, okay, I used to be like very close to him, but there's like, I'm going to help you now. They just like, it was like I could fall, and they were just having this web of hands picking me up. And I could fall, and I knew they were there. I will never forget that. The way that the whole community stepped, I'm sure, like they talked to each other. They all stepped in with practical stuff, with hugs, with, fixing me a place to stay, getting me a therapist. Unbelievable. It's like, and I've always heard people say that, oh, when something really happens, your friends are not there. But my friends, and those I didn't even know were my friends, they all stepped in, and it was just amazing to see. And it was a collective thing too. It wasn't, I think maybe that was the most beautiful. I felt like it was like a web where I could just fall and they would catch me.
I appreciate you sharing such a personal story. And I'll tell you the reason why I like asking this question so much. First of all, I often find that it activates our empathy at the end of the call, right? I feel the pain that you are in, and I feel the depth of gratitude you have for the women, this circle that was your web to hold you. But it's always a good reminder at the end of these conversations that empathy is so powerful. Like, you'll not forget the empathy that was extended to you over that period. And I think it's just an invitation to anybody who's listening and watching to turn up the volume of empathy in our lives, and that we could change the world together.
Yeah.
Thank you, Emma.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for having me. And thanks for asking.
Rich, 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 rich dialogue, as I expected with you. I adore you, and it was wonderful to spend time with you in Stockholm. I look forward to the next time. Thank you all for watching and listening. We'll see you next week at Purposeful Empathy.
If you know someone who'd benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Post the link on your socials and hit the subscribe button now. The world needs more empathy, and you have an important role to play.